Hello and welcome to the Cardboard Herald, my chance to talk with creative gamers and game creators. And I'm so excited because I have had on this show designers, I've had on this show artists, I've had on this show publishers, but I have not developed into the mysterious world of game development. I even said developed into development. It just came so naturally. And so that's why I'm so excited, because today on the show is Nathan Zabel. How's it going, Nate?
I'm doing great, man. How are you doing?
I'm doing awesome. So this is kind of cool. You contacted me saying, hey, I got this new gig going, Damage Buff, and I am going to be developing games. And I am just thrilled to hear all about what this role is, because I know that in so many professions and so many careers and so many just different sectors, people develop. They help other people's projects come along and be the best that they can be. And internally at a lot of game companies, there's game development. But for the massive world of indie gaming, there isn't too much talk, at least in the greater gamosphere, about development. So why don't you tell me a little bit about why you decided to go this route and what is game development in your eyes?
Yeah. It really came after, I've been designing games by myself for like 5 years now. And it really came after I heard an interview that someone had done with J.R. Honeycutt, and he talked about this whole idea of being a game developer. And that kind of fit into what really is fulfilling to me about work, and that's idea of helping others. And also this idea of like diversification, this idea that you can be a designer and a developer and kind of play off one another. And it's this teamwork idea and collaboration and that sort of thing. So I think there's a lot of things that interested me about it. Games have interested me for a long time. And so it's just a way to reach out and work with other people. That's the hope.
That's awesome. Well, let's start from the beginning. Games have interested you for a long time. Where was your humble beginnings? Where did you cut your teeth?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think it was anything outside the ordinary for most kids. I think my dad was like teaching me chess like when I was in second grade or something. I don't know if that's earlier or not, but I always liked games. And then we moved out of Fond du Lac and we moved out to the country. And that I just mean we moved to a place where we're like in a township, but there are no villages or anything like that around. And so my neighbor, Nick Ryan, got me into, playing D&D, playing Magic the Gathering. We played Hero Quest for the first time. I played that with him. It's funny because the first time we played that, we did like this Iron Man hardcore mode, and I think he was a little confused about the rules because we were like going through the dungeon, and every time we laid out a new map, like none of the health would reset and none of the items would reset. And so it just be like, I think we got like to stage 2 or 3 and all my characters were dead. And I was just like, well, this was fun, I guess, And so that was kind of it. That was the first time. So I didn't play that again until I was an adult. And then I played it again and actually really enjoyed it. But yeah, so that's kind of where I started with all that stuff.
It sounds like you and I have kind of some similar origins here. How old are you?
Yeah, I was going to ask you. I'm 33. I graduated in 2003 from high school anyway. So how about you? How old are you?
Yeah, just right around the same area. I'm 31. I'll be 32 in actually just a couple weeks here. So nice. We're right on the same kind of targeted time here. The second grade, learning how to play chess, and then getting introduced to Magic and Hero Quest and freaking, I don't know, all that cool stuff that TSR and Wizards of the Coast was coming out at the time. I feel like that was the perfect age to just kind of be immersed in this rapidly developing gaming community. And in the email that you originally sent me, you even mentioned Hero Quest, and that's immediately a way of like warming my heart because I have so many fond memories of playing Hero Quest. But you mentioned that you kind of didn't play that all the way through as a kid, and then you come back to it as an adult. had you been playing tabletop games this entire time, or like me, were you one of those sorts who maybe focused purely on CCGs and maybe got into the video games and then came back to it with more adult perspective later on?
Yeah, I think I've always loved video games. I still do. I play a lot of video games whenever I get the opportunity. But then my gateway into board games was actually Settlers of Catan, but it's different than most people in that I played on the Xbox 360 that came on the marketplace for that, and I was playing against the AI bots, and I was just crushing them, and it was so much fun. And then I went out and bought a real copy and introduced other people to it but that was my, Catan was most people's gateway game, but for me it was on a console, which I really, really enjoyed. And then after that kind of opened up everything else, where I started doing some research and figuring out what else was out there. So that I've never stopped playing games. I played a lot of video games and stuff like that. We played, me and my brother played Weapons and Warriors. I don't know if you're familiar with that game. Yeah. We played a ton of that. Those orange balls were all over, So that was a great game growing up. But I've always really enjoyed it. So
you the older brother or younger brother?
I'm the older brother. He's younger than me by a year and a half, but we're best friends even still. So it's we're best buddies, always were. So
is he part of the fold of Damage Buff?
No, he's not. He doesn't have a high interest in board games. We used to play a lot of video games online together and that sort of thing, but just with our lives getting so busy now, it gets harder and harder to schedule that time. And I've even gone back to him and said, hey, we gotta. It's the same thing as having a bowling league. We just got to make a night a week and make it happen, but it hasn't happened yet. So we're still working on that. But.
Totally. Well, let's actually further define this. So for people who don't know about board game development, let's say I'm a designer. I come to Damage Buff and I say, hey, here's my design. I've been working for the last 3 years on coming up with a game, just like every board gamer inevitably does. And I just pitch you something or show you something. What are you actually going to do with that, and how are you going to help me actually make it into an awesome game that's coming to the retail market? Or how are you going to help me refine it to something else, pitch it to other publishers? What happens with my game at that point?
Yeah, so there's a lot that can happen. I like there's two kind of things. It's this idea that a designer makes a game good and a developer makes it great. And kind of how that happens is, that part of the design that you might struggle with or not want to do, that's the part that I do. So that's kind of the way it works, is wherever there's a weakness, I try to fill in and help people out there. But to give examples of what I've done so far is I've done design stuff. So people have handed me things and said, hey, can you design X amount of characters? Can you design X amount of events? And then I just hand them back basically everything that I can generate. So that's really the design end. But then I've also done things where it's a lot of playtesting. It's finding groups. It's finding time, then taking notes, taking video, doing interviews, all of that sort of stuff. So they have a lot of good, concise, distilled data that they can work from. And what I can offer beyond a normal playtester is kind of that experience and that background and that knowledge of games and doing a lot of homework to be able to understand what the playtesters are saying and communicate that back to the designer in a way that they can make that an action item, basically. So it's kind of the gamut of anything from a code design, all the way up to doing stuff that's really light, where it's just like, hey, can you score the power of this specific ability? Or, here's 10 abilities. Can you score them 1 to 10? What's the most powerful? What's the least powerful? It's just kind of like an opinion thing too. So it's everything from helping you design the game to, giving you some feedback on it, basically.
So can you give me an example of like a game, not one that's necessarily brought to you, but like maybe an existing game, an established game that people have some sort of reference point on, that you look at and you go like, I think there's probably a way this could have been done better, or that this could have been improved had it taken a different route. Do you actually think about those things as you're playing games, and do you have any concrete suggestions?
Yeah, I mean, two spring to mind right away, and they're two really classics. And one is Hero Quest, and I think Hero Quest is a great game, but it's great because it's kind of bad. And the reason that I say that is like Hero Quest is like, if it were a food, it would be like a ham and cheese sandwich on white bread, where it's like no one's going to argue that can be a lunch, but there's so much more that could be developed there. And the kind of the interesting thing with my experience with it was I played it once as a child, and I've played it actually once as an adult. And when I got done playing it as an adult, I'm like, that was good. But my mind just went to work. I'm like, oh, I'd like to have magical weapons, and I'd like to have magical armors and all these abilities. And there's all this stuff that I wanted to fill in and make it so much richer. And that's kind of the interesting part of it, of that experience, was that my mind just went to work on how do we make this better. And then also with Settlers of Catan, something we actually do when we play it is we there's like the order of operations that you're supposed to take on your turn. It's supposed to be, roll the dice, trade phase, build phase, whatever it is. But the way we actually play it is that you're able to do multiple trade phases and do whatever you want in whatever order. So you can do, like at the start of your turn, you can do a trade and then build and then roll and then trade and build again if you want. And the reason that is interesting and makes the game better, in my opinion, is it allows for a lot of mitigation of that robber. Because if you have a ton of cards in hand, you'd like to be able to build and get rid of a bunch of them or trade a bunch away for more valuable cards, then get burned and have to discard, over half your hand. So, yeah, it's stuff like that.
So going back to Hero Quest again, because, again, I cannot resist talking about Hero Quest.
Yeah.
One of the things that because I'm not a designer, I'm not a developer, I don't know that I necessarily have the language to explain the feeling that I have when playing the game. But unlike a lot of modern dungeon crawls, Hero Quest, for whatever reason, facilitates imaginative play so much better than other games. And I don't think that that's necessarily the nostalgia kicking in, even though I have a lot of nostalgia for it. For example, when playing Hero Quest, something about it feels much more like a framework, a system. And immediately, as soon as playing, you start thinking about what other races, classes, monsters, furniture, stories, weapons, items could be added into the game. And it feels so easy, like it's accessible. And I think everyone who played Hero Quest, or a great majority of people who played Hero Quest, at least entertained the idea of house ruling it immediately, or coming up with those modifications, how to change it. And games that are much more modern, like, say, Descent or Imperial Assault or Gloomhaven, they don't necessarily kick in that imaginative drive. And I think that's why I latched so much onto the game Catacombs. Even though it's a dexterity game, something about it felt so much more intuitive, because you have things like, there's no 3-page long explanation of cover or anything in the game. It's literally, they can shoot an arrow at you and it either hits or it doesn't because an obstacle is in the way or not. And immediately that engages your imaginative play and gets you thinking in a different way, that how could I represent these really complex abstract ideas in an intuitive and fun physical space. And those same muscles, I think, are working all the time in Hero Quest. And I'm wondering, from your perspective, is there something to that? Is there something about a lot of modern designs that feel more restrictive than the things that even you were describing about Hero Quest or similar games? Or is this just something that is Jack Eddy having nostalgic feelings mixing in with a love of just the fun factor, and it didn't kick in again until I played a dexterity game that gave a little bit of silliness that made me feel childlike again?
No, I mean, I think you hit the nail on the head. It's that kind of that really elegant scaffold. It's a scaffold of a building, and you just want to fill in all the gaps. And what I guess the question is, like, does that make the game great, or does that mean that it's kind of underpolished? You know what I mean? Or does that mean that current games are overpolished and they don't leave any room for imagination? You know, so it's kind of like I'm designing this this tactical miniatures game right now, and it's kind of this idea of like, how do you design a game that's highly polished and has everything that it needs to have in it, but also encourages people to to expand and to explore and to develop and to create on their own. You know, I think that would be, it's kind of an interesting design challenge that I'm working with right now. So where is that line, and how do you know when it's overpolished? How do you know it's underpolished? And how do you leave space for people, to do what they want to do with it?
Yeah, I think, to use your sandwich analogy from earlier, the ham sandwich on white bread leaves you room to explore all the possibilities of what could be on that sandwich. But if you start from a club sandwich, then a club is a club. It's a known thing. It's an existing thing that has a kind of definition. And I think there's a way to be a much more elaborate, build your own sandwich type of thing that adds room for everything else, but maybe it lacks the concrete definition that people would be looking for in, I just want to order that club sandwich or that Reuben or, whatever, Monte Cristo. Take your sandwich and pick.
Yeah. Yeah. And again, I think that's the challenge is how do you deliver a highly polished game that lets people, explore and maybe create their own things. And the interesting thing when I played Hero Quest as an adult is I didn't even know the back page where it was the design your own dungeon thing. I didn't even know that was there. And so before I even got to that point, or before I even knew that, I wanted to modify it instantly. There was a whole bunch of content I wanted to add. So I don't know. I don't know if a game like Hero Quest would pass today, in the current environment, and I'm not trying to knock it. It's a great game.
Yeah, totally.
But it's so simple. It kind of begs for more, Yeah. And I think that's really cool from a design standpoint,
Yeah, and I think there are a lot of things that are just flat out archaic about it. It worked at the time, but would never pass now. The roll and move mechanic is something that instantly comes to mind. No one wants to play a roll and move game where it's like, I'm going to heroically smash this orc as soon as oh, dang, I'm moving 2 spaces. Okay, next turn, I will.
In 3 turns.
yeah, exactly. But there are a lot of cool things about that game. Another thing that, and we'll get off the Hero Quest topic, but something that I have yet to see really done in the way that Hero Quest is the anticipation that anything could be around the corner by populating the board with the furniture as you go visibly. And, there are things like Mansion of Madness 2nd Edition that populate the map as you go. Certainly you're exploring, but there's something tantalizing about having that framework of like, as soon as I turn this corner, then 3 doors have been placed on here and I have no idea what's around the other corner. So you have some knowledge of spatial arrangement before you even start the game. Like this dungeon is a fixed maximum size, but what am I actually going to find within there? And I think that is kind of, in a messy way, representative of the game itself. It has just enough definition in order to imagine the infinite possibilities of what could be within it. But that is so much about Hero Quest, and there's so much more to talk about. One of the first things that came to mind when I
hang on, there's one more thing I want to say about that. Sorry. So it's interesting. You're talking about the doors appearing and what's behind the doors, and it's the reveal, right? It's the slow reveal that's happening, right? And they did brain scans of people, and when they buy a game and they get it and they open it, right when they open the box, that's when they have like the most amount of dopamine splash over their brain. That's when they're the most excited, the most happy, because it's all about possibilities, right? And so when you're talking about Hero Quest and what's kind of like the peak thing, it makes total sense that the exploration part, or the part where it's slowly revealing itself, is the best part of the game, and so that makes total sense, because that's kind of what science has shown. And and the best part of Hero Quest is it does that on every level, and it does that over and over and over, and you don't know, it's that revealing of the unknown slowly over time.
You are so talking my language. The fact that we're getting into like scientific studies about when dopamine is released into your brain and relating that to Hero Quest. So this is already the best. But when you contacted me, you're like, hey, damage buff, it's this thing. And I immediately went to, okay, what's damage buff? And I came up with like 1,000 explanations in my brain of what damage buff could represent. So why'd you go with this name, and why name your company that?
Yeah. So it kind of goes back to a few years ago. I was taking a personality test. I've taken a few different types of them. But I took one, my friend was going to be a nurse, and I took the personality test because it was up, and she's like, you can take it. Mm-hmm. And it labeled me as a supporter. And so it's this idea where you're going to basically help other people be better. And then I looked back over a lot of my gaming career, specifically my video gaming career, if you want to call it a career. It's not like I was a pro or anything. But everything that a lot of the key moments that I remember is I pick characters that specifically make other characters better. And so do you play Overwatch at all? Are you familiar with it?
Yeah, totally.
Okay, so my favorite character in Overwatch is Mercy, hands down. And I'm a Mercy man. I have like over 100 hours into her. And the reason that I love her is because the damage buff. Because she makes whoever your high damage, your DPS character, better. She makes them more effective. And so that's the main reason why. And then I thought back even further of like, oh, my brother and I played Dark Alliance one time. Baldur's Gate Dark Alliance. It was like, I don't know if it was on the Xbox, and he played the Barbarian and I played the Necromancer. But my whole build around my character was just set up so I could make better weapons for him to smash stuff better. And he like lapped me in levels. That he was like 2 or 3 levels ahead of me because he was crushing everything, and I couldn't even stay alive. But he was crushing everything because I built the weapons for him to succeed, And so when I took that test, I realized like, oh my gosh, like, and you talk about this with the Bard when you had him on, mm-hmm. With that interview about how he is an actual Bard. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm actually a Paladin. Like, that's what I want to do. Like, it's about the aurora, the auras around me, and then it makes other people better. Like, that's my favorite thing to do in video games when I'm playing with other people. And then also being a swim coach, when I was a swim coach for 8 years, it was the same idea. Like, I'm taking young kids and I'm helping them be better swimmers and hopefully people. But when I kind of put all this stuff together, I was like, well, that has to be the name of what I'm doing, because that's exactly what I'm trying to achieve. I'm trying to reach out and work with other people and hopefully, take what they're doing and make it even better. I'm trying to help other people succeed. It's like that ladder building type idea.
Are you that type of person in real life? Like, I know that personally, I'm relating to so much what you're saying, and that I'm the type of person that in a room full of people, I feel best when I'm helping other people feel good about themselves. It's a lot of the reason why I went to social services and, just with friends. Like, I want friends to experience confidence and to have some self-assurity and to feel like they are validated, like they matter. And the idea of coming up with meaningful compliments, of, telling even strangers how they made an impact on me at the grocery store or wherever, having some sort of tangible response matters to me. And in a lot of ways, it's kind of a selfish thing, because I feel good when I'm helping other people succeed. Like, I don't feel like I'm a sycophant or anything where I'm draining someone's glory a little bit or hitching myself to someone else. But, I actually feel like I'm leaning into my strengths when I help give other people platforms, when I help spotlight their work, when I'm witnessing them do good. It makes me feel good.
No, it's 100% the same. It's 100% the same for me. It's the same thing, and it's not. It's a personality type. Like, that's what it is. It's part of it's not a personality type, but it's part of a personality that you want to help others succeed and be great. I think there are people out there that that want to be the mage or want to be the the guy in the front lines doing all the damage, but I'm happy to be in the second tier helping that guy do everything he can to do the best he can do. Like that's where I want to be. I don't want to be on the front line, so it's just part of your personality. It's part of mine too. And I think it's really cool when you start to realize that, and it kind of leads to this idea of hopefully more fulfillment in your life, because you can, once you understand that about yourself, you can kind of figure out avenues to be able to make that happen, on a more regular basis. That's a huge reason why I'm doing this development thing, because I know that about myself, and it's a way for me to use my personality and have my work be fulfilling.
Is this something that you're doing full time, or are you dipping your toes in, seeing if you can expand upon it, but it's your side gig still?
It's my side gig still, but begrudgingly. I would do this full time tomorrow if I could. I love it. I love it so much. Right now I play Sagrada in real life, so I'm a stained glass glazer. So I uninstall windows and reinstall them, take them apart, put them all back together, which is not nearly as artistic as it may sound. It's actually a lot
that sounds amazing.
It's really not. I had to, at one point you got to put copper ties in the windows so you can attach them to the bar so it has support, basically. And I was taking 18 feet of copper wire and cutting it down into 5-inch pieces. And I'm like, what am I doing? You know what I mean? So it's a lot like factory work. It is mentally more challenging than that, but I listen to a ton of podcasts while I'm at work. So it's interesting. It was interesting to learn, but it's not feeding that part of my kind of fulfillment need, so that's why I'm looking to do this, hopefully.
So if someone out there, we have designers that listen to this podcast, they are, trying to take their design to the next level. And why don't you give the pitch? Why should they pay for your services? Like, how are you actually going to fundamentally help them get to release? And I know that we kind of addressed some of this earlier, but it can't be too expensive, because then it would be prohibitive to other people. And you have to have one hell of a compelling argument to take a creator, someone who had a vision of something that they feel personally very invested in, to say, you know what, have me as part of your team, and I'm actually going to make it succeed. What's the actual pitch that you're going to make to someone?
I think the pitch is the time saving. I think that when you have more people involved, the amount of time you're going to spend on something is going to be way less. You're going to be able to dodge out of situations where you're headed down a wrong corridor, and if you got out of the echo chamber of your own head, you would have saved yourself a bunch of time. So I think that, oddly enough, I think a lot of game designers are, and there's also kind of the mental variety thought that I can kind of offer. So I think a lot of game designers, it seems like anyway, to me, from what I've heard on all the podcasts, are like IT or computer or programmers, right? So that's a specific type of mindset you kind of need typically to make those kind of things happen. And I have an art background, so I went to art school. I have an emphasis in drawing. And so there's going to be a balance there. And I'm not going to think like the way the designer thinks. I'm going to think differently. And I think there's a strength to that. There's a strength in having something be more balanced, and having not someone play the devil's advocate, but to hear the other side of, okay, here's this mechanic, and I can tell you how it feels because I'm in touch with that sort of thing. I can also offer feedback. Being in art school, you worked on drawing for 30 hours, you put it up on the window, and people tear it down. So between having that kind of experience and working with teenagers and giving them feedback, I have a lot of experience in giving feedback to people, and I can deliver information in a clear and concise way that's not going to stomp all over somebody's feelings where this sucks. Like, that's not going to happen. I'm going to say, all right, this could be optimized better this way, in my opinion. And the other thing too is I'm not going to do anything that someone doesn't want me to do. I'm not here to redesign anything. I'm just here to help. So with my current contract, with whom I'm working with, Matt Kwok, out of Mountaintop Games, he just sends me a list of stuff to do, and then I knock it out and get it right back to him as soon as I can. That's pretty much how it works. So it's really just that it's a labor saving device, and maybe we'll become friends too. So that's kind of the pitch.
Well, brass tacks, is this actually going to cost money up front? Is this part of like a percentage of sales down the road? What's the method of which you're going to negotiate with the person who brings a project to you? Or is it just a case by case basis? Give me a call and we will start figuring this out.
Yeah. So typically what I've done in the past is if someone will reach out and I'll ask for some work. So about 3 hours of work. Of whatever they want me to do, and then I'll give that back to them, and that's free of charge. And that's just to be sure that I'm going to deliver something that's going to be useful to them, basically, and that they feel like they can go forward. So basically, it's risk free to start, and I have time where I can do that. That's not a big deal. And then we kind of go from there, based on an hourly basis is how I've been running it now. If somebody really wanted to negotiate something for a percentage of sales or something like that, or we got into kind of a co-design situation, we can cross those bridges when we get there. But that's how it's worked so far. And so far it's been good. And then whenever I reach a threshold of hours, I send the person a report of like, hey, here's what I've done. Here's how much time I spent on it. Send PayPal me the money, and we'll be good to go. So it's pretty straightforward. It's just like hiring a contractor, basically.
Yeah, it sounds like you are somewhere a mix between like a coach and an agent, and I love all of it because, there's so many aspects to game design to actually have like a nice product in the end, and the idea of the game itself is just the beginning, and then getting the art, facilitating how to actually develop it into a well-defined thing, having play tests done, and then eventually, I don't know if you do this, but even handling the connections, I know some artists, or here's how you might go about manufacturing. Here's, what a standard Kickstarter project is. I think that there's room for people to help facilitate games beyond just refining the design. And it's cool to see that, these roles are being developed like you out there. And is that like a potentiality that you see down the road, that you could be the guy who just says, let's see the design, let's get it working, and then I will help carry you through all the steps to completion?
I mean, yeah, the end goal is to be able to help out basically wherever someone is lacking. But I'm also going to be really, really upfront with what I know and what I don't know. So like I've never run a Kickstarter before. I've done some homework on it, and I can offer some advice, but I definitely can't run someone's Kickstarter campaign for it. I'm also dyslexic. So if you want me to look over your rules and check for grammar and punctuation and spelling, I'm not your guy, So I'll be real honest about what my strengths are and what my weaknesses are. Like that doesn't bother me at all. There's plenty of services out there if you do need your rule book checked or whatever. There's other people that are really, really good at that. I'm not one of them. So it's just kind of like knowing really where you can help, and knowing where where someone else will be able to help better. Basically, it's helping the person you can to the best of your ability, and then when your ability is not great, find them somebody else, basically. So.
Well, that's really interesting. Going back, if you don't mind me asking about dyslexia, I'm getting a little tongue-tied here. Is that a accessibility issue to new board games that come across your hands? Like if you have a hard time, I guess, editing a rule book, do you have a hard time with purely, I guess, written instructions? Like, is that something that you have any challenges with?
Well, I'm just like straight up, I'm a slower than average reader, definitely. But I have a good memory. So like I've read rule books like RPG books. I have a small collection of them, and I just read them for leisure, which is kind of weird. But I'm just slow.
I totally get that.
Yeah.
I used to collect the Legend of the Five Rings RPG supplements and would just read them as lore for the game.
Yeah. And so it's just even inside of that, it's just like the first rule book. Like I'll just read rule sets for RPGs, and I've done that in the past. And so like I can get through it. It's not like I can't read or anything like that. It's just going to take me 1.25 times as much time as the average person. I can't rip through it. But when I do finally get through it at a little bit longer time, it's in there, and I have pretty good recall and that type of stuff. So it's kind of like, I don't know, it's kind of like, you get a disadvantage here, but you get an advantage over here. It's kind of like your stats are all evening out in the end. So
distribution, an allocation of your stat points. Yeah, right. You seem incredibly thoughtful and considerate of all sorts of facets of this type of thing. You seem like a really intellectual person, but at the same time, like I can see how that can be a factor in your own desire to I guess develop and help games be what they can be, because you're approaching things from a slightly different perspective. And also, did that lead into any of your artistic background? Like I don't know, like I don't know how big of an impact dyslexia can have on someone, but did your I guess slower reading at all give you some sort of tendency to interpreting things visually as opposed to strictly through language?
Well, I think the dyslexia thing was a huge driver for me to become an artist in general, because this is going to sound really goofy, but it's totally true. In college, the only degree you can have where you don't have to take a foreign language is an art degree. And I didn't know I was dyslexic till after I got out of college. So I took art to dodge the foreign language. And oddly enough, auditorily, like I can do foreign languages. I can listen and repeat something back very easily. But the reading portion, I'm having a hard time reading English. You know what I mean? So it's going to be even harder to read Spanish, because that's going to be even more mixed up. So that was the big reason why I went to the art degree in general. I don't think it pushed me there. It was more like dodging a bullet, basically. I don't know.
It's a compelling story either way. And you can hear even in my voice, like I'm trying to be like thoughtful as I approach the subject. Like, it's one of those things that you don't want to offend, but at the same time, I don't take it as like you're the type of guy who would get offended by me verbally tripping over my own words or something. But like all of this show is about creative gamers and game creators and their path, whatever that could be. And so, hearing about some of the challenges that people have overcome in their lives, and some of the circumstances that they found themselves in, whether it's a goofy way of getting around a foreign language, or it's like a really tough hill that they chose to surmount themselves. I think it's still integral in one way or another, even if we don't know the exact way that it's integral to someone's story. And that's why I like exploring some of that stuff. But I do want to know, like, what do you envision success in Damage Buff as? Not just in like one individual game, but like, what do you want this company to be one day beyond the basic financially stable?
I just looked at J.R. Honeycutt. I mean, he's got a team of people that he works with every day. I mean, that would be awesome. That's kind of the goal, is to be, for me to be working full time on it, and then to bring other people on. Because if we had all these playtesters in house and all these different people that could offer all these different strengths and cover each other's weaknesses, we could really crank through some stuff really quickly. And not only that, but to be able to work with people again. I mean, the thing about where I work is I work with I work with the best people. That's the hard part about it, is that when I move to do this full time, I'll be down here in my basement by myself. And that's kind of the hard part about it. But it is something I want to do, but it will be nice to work with people again. So that's kind of the goal, is to form my own team and to support them, and to have, not only the game designers I can support, but also, fellow developers that I could, be working full time alongside with, basically.
So you have clearly spent so much time thinking about feedback, about coaching. You've received feedback your entire life as an artist. It must have been grueling, the amount of feedback that you've received. And then you've also given feedback.
Then as a swimmer too, I swam in high school and then in college too. So it's like my whole life was, around feedback. Basically, it's not only giving it but receiving. I just never thought about that before, is that not only in the art, realm, but also as a swimmer too.
Well, you mentioned earlier that's exactly where I was going, that you were a swimming coach. Like, is this something that's been with you your entire life? Like, even at a young age, you were finding yourself in roles where you were giving feedback to other people? Or is this something that came at a particular time in your life where you started transitioning from receiving to being someone in a position where you were delivering that to other people?
Yeah, I don't know. I always liked to give advice to my friends and stuff when I was growing up. And then in swimming, I didn't, it's weird because I didn't get a lot of feedback because I was coachable. I guess that's what a lot of my coaches would say. He's like highly coachable. So if you tell him what to do, he'll do it, basically, the best of his ability. I think that kind of showed up in my work too. But then I was an artisan baker for like 9 months, and I was kind of doing that. And another one of those situations where it's like, what am I doing? I'm staying up all night making this awesome bread, but this is not what I want to do. And then I was like,
drooling over here. I want to stay up all night making bread.
Man, it was pretty crazy. It's like 10 o'clock at night to 7 o'clock in the morning, and you don't get a break. Like you got to work all the way through. No lunch, no breaks, no sitting down. But I'm just like, why am I doing this? I could go be a swim coach. There's a job that opened up, and my college coach was not that great, and I was like, I could do a better job than that. So then I went and coached for 8 years. And had a pretty good career. So, and then I was on the other side of it, where I tried to be the coach that I would have wanted to have as a swimmer, and try to give feedback that I would have wanted to hear, and to not only touch base with a kid about like, all right, here's what you're doing wrong, here's what you got to do it right, but then to touch base with them again and say, okay, that's better, or oh, it's not better enough, it's not quite where it needs to be yet. So it's that not just hitting it once, but hitting it again to make sure that, the swimmer really had mastered it, basically. So I don't know. There's been a lot of communication practice,
Totally.
So.
Who do you typically tabletop game with these days?
Oh, nobody. I mean, I watch, basically. And it's also another thing that I've always enjoyed growing up is watching people play games. I've always, like, if we're playing a one-player game, it was the old, SNES. I'd rather watch my brother play than play myself. I don't know why I always enjoyed it. And then coaching too, in that point too, was like telling him what to do. And I could never do it, but I could tell him what he needed to do to succeed. It goes back to the whole succeeding thing. But yeah, so now as a developer, you don't really play the games. You just kind of watch people play. You gotta read, not even sometimes not what they say. It's what they're feeling. So you got to read their faces, and we got years of experience doing this too from swim coaching. You got to look at a teenager right in the face, and then not read what they're saying, but read what their face is saying, and spot lies and that type of thing, because they will lie to you, unfortunately. But it's that type of thing. So I'm watching games more than I'm playing, for sure, with whatever I'm developing, and then I'm designing my own stuff, and I watch a bunch of videos on YouTube. I try to stay current on what's being designed and developed, and what's coming out, and rule sets for inspiration, and just for staying current on kind of the state of the art. So I don't do as much gaming as I would like to at all. I wish I had a standing game night, but I also just moved 9 months ago to a new place, so I don't have an established game group yet. So it's something that I'm working toward, and hopefully as I make this transition, that will be a thing that can come to fruition as well.
You approach this so professionally. Like, I got to imagine that you're pretty disciplined about things like professional development as well. I mean, you were mentioning that you keep up with current games and seeing what's actually coming out, but also at the same time, like, are you reading designer notes? Are you following any of the big people out there who are, giving little nuggets of information? I know a lot of designers, especially newer aspiring designers, latch on to things like Jamie Stegmeier's blog, Jeff Engelstein's stuff with Ludology, Board Game Design Lab. Those are all great resources out there. Are those things that you keep current with? And if there's other resources out there that you recommend that any new designer kind of latch onto, what would they be? Again, going back to the dyslexia thing, I don't do too much reading, but what I do at work, because I'm allowed to, is I listen to about 8 or 9 hours of podcasts every day. And I've gone through all of Ludology. I've gone through all of Board Game Design. I've gone through your complete list of stuff. I listen to your stuff at everything at like 1.5 speed. So I'm going through like 12 hours, more than that, about 12 hours of podcasts every day. And that's not all game design stuff, because I've actually run out. So actually, on the flip side, I'm looking for more stuff, because I've pretty much devoured everything that seems to be of use right now. It's all the things you mentioned, as well as the Board Game Design Roundtable. That's a really good one. I think there's Rob Davio and some other guys on it. But I pretty much find something, latch onto it, and then work backwards through every episode until I'm done, and then I just stay current with it. So it's kind of like it took me 2 weeks to go through all your podcasts, basically. Wow.
So,
well, with this overwhelming amount of content that you're consuming through your work, is there some aspect of the community that you'd like to see more of out there, that someone listening to this right now might be like, I'm the perfect person to deliver that in podcast form? Maybe you are the perfect person. Damage Buff is going to create the board game coaching podcast or something out there. What's something that you'd like to see more of out of this community? Because you sound like you have a ton of perspective on this.
Man, just more great content, just more stuff like your shows and the Board Game Design Lab. I mean, you guys both do such a great job, and all the other podcasts I mentioned as well. Just more stuff at high quality, different spins on it. I think your show specifically is great because it really takes kind of these industry titans and it humanizes them, right? You kind of you crack these people, you kind of win them over, and they relate to you as a person. And we get to see kind of this glimpse behind the curtain as to who this person actually is, and also kind of the audacity of some of these people in a way where, I've heard a couple of these stories where these people just put themselves out there, kind of with not being 100% prepared, and they do amazing stuff. And that's part of the reason I asked to come on the podcast. It's the same idea where I want to do some amazing stuff too. I want to work with people and help make better games. But I'm pretty new at this, but I have a lot of knowledge and some experience. But I think it's just more shows. If anybody is on the fence about doing a show, man, give it a go. Do 10 episodes and see how it goes, because there's plenty of space out there, and I'm running out of things to listen to. So just more great content, basically.
You'll have at least one listener out there.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. And I'll listen to your whole catalog. I won't stop till I'm done. So.
Man, I don't know that I could listen to my whole catalog at this point. Maybe at 1.5 times speed, I can make it through. But what you were saying about people having audacity, that is part of the core of what I love about gaming, is that joy through playing and imaginative play, but just play overall is such a unifying experience. It connects you to the person across from you, even if you have no other reasonable way of connecting with them because of cultural barriers, because of, backgrounds, economic status, all these different things. The idea that here at the table with this game, we're on a level playing field, and you can kind of separate yourself and all the baggage that you have to interact with these people is amazing. And then furthermore, the community itself and the industry is in a lot of ways still very grassroots, and people who are audacious and have skill and have talent can put themselves out there and interact in a reasonable playing field with these industry giants and everything. Like, it may be that Matt Leacock completely changed the industry with Pandemic coming out, right? But he's still going to the same conventions that, you and I would be going to in order to play games, check out new games, test new prototypes, that type of stuff. Bruno Catala, even Reinhard Knizia, these people are still gamers who are engaged in the same community and industry that we are, with few exceptions, as opposed to the kind of tiering system that exists in a lot of other industries. And I think that makes it very inviting to industrious people who have good ideas and have talent and have perspective to just put themselves out there and try it. And that's a big part of the compelling story for Damage Buff for me, about you emailing me and being like, hey, here's something that I'm doing. You haven't talked to many developers on your show, or any developers on your show, at least with that as their main forefront of their profession. And I think that this is something of value that people could have. And immediately I was like, yes, that sounds awesome. And I think that as long as you can back that up, you can demonstrate to people, I can do this, you will be so well received. So I'm super excited to see what's on the horizon for Damage Buff. And I hope that is going to be the story, 10 years from now, when you got all your employees, you got your whole team, and everyone.
I hope it's 5 years from now.
5 years from now. But 10 years from now, we can have the 10th anniversary podcast interview where I'm the big podcast mogul who's making somehow any sort of money off of a podcast. You're making all of your millions of board game dollars, and we can talk and just be like kings.
Man, your podcast is so great, man. You gotta get your Patreon set up, man. I would be a Patreon subscriber today. You have great content. Are you working on it?
Literally, I am working on it. It's one of those hard things. Like, we were talking about earlier about who wants to be the mage, who wants to be the support. It's hard for me to be like, hey, you should give me some money. And I have recorded like a video like 3 times for 3 different ways of making that pitch. And I have the page all set up, and I'm going to do it because I need support in order to expand at this point. So it's funny that you would bring that up now. Literally on my checklist on my phone of things to do tonight is to finish editing this video. But it's still one of those things of like, I don't know, like, is it something that I would even pay money to? Like, that's the big argument. Would I put money into this at this point? And I think I would, but then again, I'm me, and most of the world is not me. But
I don't know. I think you undervalue your service. I think you do a great thing for a lot of people. It's made a huge difference, just in my life, for what that's worth. But I think you undervalue it. It's such an awesome podcast, and there's nothing else out there like it. And you don't even have to ask for money. You just have to tell people that they have the opportunity if they want to. And moreover, you can sell it as like, hey, this money will go toward X. When you raise funds and you put it toward X, and by X I mean for you it would be like a camera, so you can have your focusing issues taken care of on your videos. Like, just say, hey, I'm going to get a digital SLR so I can take care of this stuff. It's going to be $1,500, and I'm going to keep saving until it gets there. People will throw money into that because they value what you're doing and they want to support you. And the people who don't have time to chase down their dreams, or just can't because they're not in a situation, they will give money to the people who are doing it because they vicariously want them to succeed, just like we want other people to succeed. I want you to succeed at what you're doing, and I think you want me to succeed too. So we're all trying to help each other out. You don't have to ask for anything. You just have to open the door and let people help. I think that's where we're at.
See, I just got to listen to this over and over and over again, and that's just going to be how I go to bed at night, is listening to this little bit of coaching here, and that's exactly what you do. And
you should, man. You should do it.
I think that's the perfect way of representing, what kind of role that you can play being in someone's corner. So if someone listens to this, they're interested in checking out what Damage Buff has to offer them. How are they going to check it out, and where can they find you? Like, are you going to some conventions here soon? What kind of upcoming things should people be looking out for on you?
Yeah, so damagebuff.com is the best way to get a hold of me. Go to the website and go to the contact page and shoot me an email. If you just want to shoot me an email once a week and check in, there's no charge for that. If you just want to bounce some ideas off of me weekly, that's fine. No cost. If you want to send me out a prototype and have me play it, then we can kind of go from there. And then I will be at Geekway of the West May 17th, 18th, 19th, and 20th. If you're going to be there, you want to play some games, you want to bring a prototype, so you don't have to mail it to me. You want to meet up and have dinner or have some drinks or something. I'm down for any of that stuff. So reach out. I did it actually. I reached out to Kirk, who I met at Protospiel. I can't think of his last name, unfortunately, but he did an interview over on the Board Game Design Lab, and I realized I was going to be at Protospiel, and he was too, and I reached out and met him. So reach out, people. Don't be afraid. I'm just a normal guy, just like you guys. And I hope to see some people there.
Awesome. Well, I want to make a commitment that 1 year from now, we check in, we see how things are going, and I have no doubt that you're going to have some really exciting things to announce at that point.
Awesome, man. That'd be great. Well, and you too. I hope that Patreon's up by then.
Yeah. I'll make a commitment now that it's going to be up by how about this? By the time that I air this episode, my Patreon will at least be accessible to anyone out there.
All right. That's good. That's good. That's setting a goal.
Well, it's been a pleasure, Nate. Thanks for coming on.
Yeah. Thanks for having me on. I really appreciate it. And I will talk to you next year.
Sounds good. If not sooner at a convention.
Hopefully so.
Right. Would you believe it? I actually managed to set up the Patreon based off of this interview, and here it is. It exists, and you all showed up. How cool is that? Nate showed up. He became a patron, and I'm so excited for what Damage Buff has around the horizon. Like, they're on the precipice of something so cool. There's so many opportunities for a board game developer, someone helping produce these things. That's such an awesome avenue that I'd love to explore more. And I really can't wait for the first time that I'm talking with someone for an interview here for a game that they designed, and they're like, yo, listen up. I helped produce this, to develop it, to design it with Damage Buff as my help in the corner. How cool would that be? It'd be like the circle is complete. So definitely check out what Damage Buff has on the horizon. And now, before we go, I wanted to say thank you for listening to the Cardboard Herald. As always, everything we do is ad-free and audience supported. If you'd like to help keep it that way, find the Patreon link at the top of our webpage, just like we talked about. That webpage is cardboardherald.com. We have several levels of support with various rewards, including us saying thank you on air. So I'm going to take this specific episode an opportunity to just say thanks, Nate, for really giving me the confidence boost that I needed. And you were right. People showed up, and people are continuing to show up. And it is helping us out so much to grow, to expand, to reach some of our goals. We have some really great support by some publishers, Weird Giraffe, Elzra Games, Stonemeyer Games, in order to help reward the patrons down the road, and ways that you could participate and really become part of the very fabric of TCbH itself. So thank you, Nate, for really giving me that nudge, that motivation, that push. And that kind of ties into your whole nature and what Damage Buff is all about. So thank you. You all go check out Damage Buff, and then go check out our Patreon, which is at the link at the top of our page. If you enjoyed this show, we do a whole bunch of other stuff, including reviews, interviews, and recommendations across writing, podcasts, and video, which you can find all of that once again through our website, www.cardboardherald.com. So with that, I'm out of here. Thank you so much for listening.